Naya watched her name disappear from the guest list. No phone call, no message, just a smirk from her cousin and a snide whisper. "This isn't the kind of party for market girls," she smiled. "Then I guess I'll show up as royalty." And 3 nights later, she did. Naya had always felt like the extra piece in her own family, present but never truly seen. They didn't hate her, but they never really loved her either. They just tolerated. When her uncle received special invitations for a fancy engagement party thrown by the governor's family, everyone in the house got one, except Naya. No one even bothered to explain why, but she saw it in their eyes, especially Soma's, her cousin who always looked for ways to mock her. Soma smirked as she held up her own golden invitation, then turned to Naya with a sneer. "You'd embarrass us with your thrift store dress," she said, laughing with Lindy like it was a joke. Naya didn't say anything. She just smiled softly. What they didn't know was that Naya had already started sewing a dress herself, one she designed late at night after work, using fabric she had saved for months. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She just wanted something that felt like her. While everyone else ran after brands and borrowed jewelry, Naya sat quietly in her small room, stitching her outfit with steady hands and quiet dreams. Her dress might not be expensive, but every thread carried a part of her story, her strength, her struggle, her patience. Deep inside, she felt the sting of being left out, but instead of breaking down, she whispered to herself, "If they don't see my worth, I'll show them what they miss." Naya lived a quiet, simple life. During the day, she worked in a small library where the shelves smelled like old pages and peace. She helped people find books, guided school children, and always wore a soft smile. At night, she taught coding to young kids in her neighborhood, mostly for free, because she believed every child should have a chance to dream beyond their street. She didn't have much, but whatever she had, she shared. She didn't wear flashy makeup. Her shoes weren't new, and her perfume was just a soft soap scent. But when Naya walked into a room, people noticed, not because of how she looked, but because of how she made them feel. There was something rare about her, like calm in the middle of a storm. You couldn't see it on her, but you could feel it around her. When she heard about the engagement party, she didn't plan to crash it or beg for an invite, but deep inside, she wished things were different. She looked at her reflection one night and thought, maybe they're right. Maybe I don't belong. Still, she didn't let those thoughts win. She took out the fabric she had saved for months. Soft, plain, but full of meaning. Every part of that cloth reminded her of someone she had helped or a moment she had survived. She poured her little savings into it and stitched a dress quietly in the evenings, not because she wanted to be noticed, but because she wanted to show up for herself. The dress wasn't from a designer. It didn't carry a famous name, but it carried her story, her dignity, her strength, and that was more powerful than any label. Still, as the date of the party came closer, Naya started to doubt herself. Maybe she wouldn't go. Maybe it was better to stay invisible. But then, her phone buzzed. A message. A name she barely expected to hear from. Jet. The same young man whose notebook she had once returned clean and dry after spilling tea on it at a cafe. He hadn't forgotten her kindness. And now, right when she was about to back away from the world again, fate stepped in. Jet's message was simple, just a few words. But to Naya, it felt like someone had finally opened a window in a room she thought she was locked out of. He had seen the fabric no one else noticed. It happened on a rainy afternoon. Naya had stepped into a quiet cafe, soaked from the sudden downpour, looking for shelter and maybe a warm cup of tea. She found a corner seat, far from the noisy crowd, and settled in with her sketchbook. Across from her sat a young man with glasses, focused on writing in a dark brown leather journal. His face looked calm, almost thoughtful, like someone who saw the world a little differently. Just as she turned to pick up her tea, her elbow nudged her cup, and it tilted, spilling straight onto his open journal. Her heart dropped. She gasped and quickly grabbed tissues to help, mumbling, "I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to," over and over again. The man looked down at the stained pages, then up at her flustered face. For a second, she expected anger, but he didn't shout. He didn't scold. He just gave a small smile and said, "It's okay. It's just paper." Still, Naya felt terrible. She offered to replace it, but he shook his head kindly. "No need. Things happen." But that night, Naya couldn't forget how kind he had been. Most people would have snapped. Some would have embarrassed her in public, but he didn't. So the next day, she returned to the same cafe with the same journal. now carefully cleaned and dried. The ink had smudged in some places, but she had done her best to make it usable again. When she walked in, he was already there. His eyes lit up in surprise when he saw her holding the journal. She handed it to him quietly and said, "I hope this helps a little. I know it's not perfect, but I tried." He looked at the journal, then at her, really looked at her. And that's when he said something she never forgot. "You have the kind of hands that fix what others throw away." It wasn't just about the journal. Somehow he saw something deeper in her, something no one in her own family ever noticed. Not her patience, not her care, not her quiet strength, just this one stranger who had watched her for a moment and still saw more than most people had in years. That small accident became something much bigger. It was the first time Naya felt seen without having to shout, the first time someone looked past her clothes, past her background, and into the kind of person she truly was. And that stranger, his name was Jet. It was just 3 days before the big party. Naya was in her small room, folding clothes and trying to distract herself from the thought of being left out. Everyone in the house was talking about the event, what they'd wear, who they might meet, how important the guest list was. They didn't even try to hide the fact that she wasn't included. They acted like she didn't exist. She had quietly accepted it, or at least tried to. Then, out of nowhere, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Jet. "Would you be my +1?" Naya stared at the screen for a few seconds, thinking maybe she had read it wrong. Her heart started racing. She sat down, rereading the words, trying to make sense of them. Did he mean that party? The same one where her name had been left out like she didn't matter? Before she could even type a reply, another message came. "You may not know this, but I'm the minister's son." She let out a breath she didn't even realize she was holding. The minister's son. The quiet guy from the cafe who smiled instead of shouting. The same one who told her she had hands that fix things. She never once imagined that someone like him came from a family like that. Her hands trembled slightly as she held the phone, but her heart felt full. In one message, everything shifted. The party she was told she wasn't classy enough for was now opening its doors to her. Not because she forced her way in, not because she begged, but because someone saw her worth and chose her. It wasn't just an invite. It was a message to every voice that had ever told her she wasn't enough. The same girl, who was laughed at for her thrift dress, now had a personal invitation from the son of one of the most powerful men in the city. Naya didn't smile out of pride. She smiled out of quiet peace. The kind that comes when life unexpectedly reminds you you were never the problem. They just didn't see you clearly. This wasn't about revenge. It was about showing up in a space where she truly belonged all along. Only this time, the seat they refused to give her, it now had her name on it, written with respect. The night of the party finally came. It was grand, loud, and full of the city's richest and most powerful people. Expensive cars lined up outside. Flashing lights danced across the walls. Inside, everything sparkled. The chandeliers, the gowns, the smiles. Everyone who was somebody was there. And then the doors opened again. Naya walked in, her hand gently resting on Jet's arm. She didn't rush. She didn't need to. Her steps were calm and steady, but they carried a quiet power. People turned their heads, not because they knew her, but because they felt something rare, something that made them pause mid-conversation and just watch. The music kept playing, but the air shifted. It was as if the whole room silently asked, "Who is she?" She wasn't wearing diamonds. Her dress didn't scream for attention, but the way she carried herself made it impossible to ignore her. She wasn't trying to fit in. She was simply being herself, and that was more powerful than anything money could buy. Auntie Runo, who always believed in showing off status, couldn't hide her shock. Her mouth dropped open just slightly. Soma, who had laughed at Naya just days ago, was holding a drink. But as soon as she saw Naya walk in with Jet, the glass slipped from her hand and crashed to the floor. No one even looked at the mess. They were too focused on Naya. And then came the whisper from the front of the hall. Mrs. Ajike, the woman who organized the whole event, the same one who had once said Naya wasn't high class enough to be on the list, leaned toward another guest and asked in amazement, "Who styled her?" Vogue. But it wasn't the dress that made people stare. It was the way Naya stood tall, smiled softly, and moved with calm confidence. She didn't look down on anyone. She didn't pretend to be someone she wasn't. She just walked into the room like she belonged, because finally she believed she did. That moment wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was silent, but it burned. She didn't come to prove anyone wrong. She came because she had stopped doubting her worth. And in that silence, while all eyes followed her every step, the message was loud and clear. The girl they once left off the list had become the main event. Naya hadn't even been at the party for an hour, but already the energy around her had changed. The same people who once ignored her, who didn't think she was important enough to invite, were now lining up just to greet her. Suddenly, everyone wanted to smile at her. Their words were too nice, their compliments too forced, like they were trying to make up for something without saying it out loud. Auntie Runo, who used to look right through her, now gave her a warm hug and said, "My dear, you look absolutely stunning." Naya smiled politely, but inside she remembered all the times she sat in silence while Auntie Runo praised Soma and Lindy and never once looked her way. Even Lindy, who once said Naya was too basic to attend high-class events, acted like they were best friends. "We should totally hang out more," she said, holding Naya's hand too long. Naya gently pulled back with a soft nod, keeping her grace, but not pretending. But the moment that stood out most was when Soma walked up to her. Her smile was small, tight, and clearly fake. She leaned in close, trying to sound casual, and said quietly, "Next time, tell us before you arrive like this. You almost gave me a heart attack." She tried to laugh, but her voice cracked just slightly. Naya looked her cousin straight in the eye. There was no anger, no pride, just calm truth. "Next time," she said softly, "make your list with more wisdom." And with that, she turned away, not to be rude, but because the conversation was already over. That one line was enough. It carried all the weight of what had happened. It reminded everyone that they had judged her too quickly, that they had made decisions based on what they thought she was, not who she truly is. They had left her out to protect their image, but now they were the ones chasing hers. She didn't have to shout or prove anything. Her presence said it all. The whispers continued around the room. Who is she really? How did she end up with Jet? Is she someone important now? But Naya didn't answer any of those questions. She didn't need to. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was just being herself. And for the first time, that was more than enough. From the very beginning, they had planned to push her to the side, just in case she somehow managed to show up. If Naya had found her way into the event, they had already decided her seat would be far at the back, near the restrooms, a place where no one important would notice her. A seat meant to remind her that she didn't belong, but things didn't go as they expected. When Naya walked into the ballroom, not only was she on the guest list, she was now a highlight of the night. And the table that waited for her, it wasn't in the back corner, it wasn't hidden, it was right in front, facing the main stage, with a perfect view of the entire hall. Her seat was next to ministers, tech company founders, diplomats, and powerful guests who spoke with quiet respect and listened when she spoke, the kind of people who shaped the future. And now, here she was among them, not because of luck, but because of her character. She sat beside Jet, not clinging to him, not hiding behind him, but holding his hand with quiet confidence. It was clear to everyone around them, she wasn't just someone's plus one. She was someone who belonged in the room by her own right. She didn't need to speak loudly or explain herself. Her grace, her presence, and the way she carried herself said everything. People came over to greet her, some out of curiosity, some because they were genuinely impressed, some, perhaps, because they realized too late that she had something they had overlooked: authenticity. She didn't try to fit into their world. She brought her own light with her, and it lit up the entire space. As she looked across the room, she noticed a few familiar faces watching her from the far corner. The ones who once said she would embarrass the family. The ones who laughed at the idea of her being at this party. Now, they were looking at her with wide eyes, unsure of what to say or how to approach her. Naya didn't smirk. She didn't wave. She simply turned her head, listened to the conversation at her table, and smiled, not to show off, but because for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The table they tried to block had become a place of honor, and the girl they thought wasn't worthy now sat at the front, not by accident, but by purpose. The night was full of music, lights, and laughter. Important guests made their speeches, People with big names, big titles, and big voices. Everyone clapped politely after each one, already knowing who would speak next. It was all very formal and expected. But then, the MC stepped up again and smiled. "Now," he said, "we'd like someone unexpected to say a few words." There was a pause in the room. People glanced around, unsure who would stand. That's when Jet slowly rose to his feet. Calmly, he held the mic and said, "I'd like to introduce someone who has taught me more about strength and grace than any title ever could. Please welcome Naya." For a moment, the room went still. Naya stood up. Her hands were steady. Her heart was full, but not heavy. She didn't plan this. She hadn't written anything down. But as she walked to the center of the room, something inside her told her she was ready. She looked around, not to show off, but to truly see the faces that once looked past her. Then she gently took the mic, smiled, and began. "I wasn't born into wealth," she said softly, "and I wasn't raised with titles or fame, but I was raised with something I've come to value deeply, kindness. And I've learned that class isn't about what you wear or how loud your name is." She paused for a second, letting her words sink in. Class is not in your clothes. It's in how you carry others when they drop you. It's how you treat people when they can't offer you anything. The room was silent, not because they were unsure, but because they were truly listening. Some nodded slowly, some looked down, thoughtful. Then the clapping began, first soft and polite, then louder, warmer. The sound filled the hall, but not everyone clapped. From one of the front tables, Auntie Runo sat stiffly. Her hands didn't move. Her face didn't change. She just looked at Naya with quiet eyes and slowly lowered her gaze. Not out of anger, but because, deep inside, she knew Naya was right. Naya handed back the mic with a calm smile and returned to her seat beside Jet. She didn't need to say more. She had already said everything that needed to be heard. That short speech wasn't about proving a point. It was about telling a truth. And in that moment, even without trying, Naya reminded everyone in the room that real elegance begins where ego ends. The next morning, everything had changed, but not in a loud or dramatic way. It began quietly. A few photos from the event showed up online, then short video clips. One of her walking in with Jet, another of her giving that short but powerful speech. And within hours, people were sharing them everywhere. Strangers were writing things like, "Who is she?" and "This is the kind of woman our girls should look up to." Before Naya even woke up, her story was already spreading, not because of her dress or who she came with, but because of the way she held herself, the way she spoke, the way she made people feel. Young girls started messaging her, girls who had been told they weren't good enough, girls who had been made to feel invisible. They said things like, "You make me feel seen," or "I want to be like you one day." Naya read each message slowly, tears in her eyes, feeling deeply moved. For so long, she thought no one noticed her. Now, her story was giving others the courage to believe in themselves. Then, something even more unexpected happened. Her small library, where she worked so hard, started receiving donations. People wanted to help. They offered books, computers, even money to fix the leaking roof and buy chairs for the children. And the coding center where she taught at night, that too got noticed. A big company reached out, offering full scholarships to her top students. Lives began to change, not just hers, but those around her too. But maybe the most surprising moment came from the very women who once mocked her. Aunties who once laughed at her clothes and ignored her presence now reached out quietly. Some asked if she could mentor their daughters. Others invited her to speak at their events. They tried to act like they'd always believed in her. But Naya knew the truth, and yet she didn't respond with pride or payback. She simply replied with grace. She hadn't chased power. She hadn't tried to make anyone feel small. She just stayed true to herself, and somehow that became her greatest strength. The same people who once pushed her aside now looked to her for direction. Naya didn't need to raise her voice. Her story did the speaking for her, and as her quiet influence grew, one thing became clear to everyone watching. Real power doesn't shout. It rises, gently and with purpose. Some weeks later, Naya was invited to another high society event, this time not as anyone's guest, but as a guest of honor. Her name was on the invitation. Her seat was already prepared at the front. This time, no one questioned if she belonged. No one looked past her. In fact, many looked only at her. As she walked through the room, People whispered again, but not with judgment. Now, it was with admiration. They remembered her from the last event. They had read her story online. They had seen how she carried herself without trying to prove anything. And now, many tried to copy her quiet elegance, her calm strength, her simplicity. During the event, a well-dressed woman came up to Naya with a soft smile and curious eyes. She said, "You walk like you were born for this. How did you become so refined?" Naya looked at her for a moment and smiled gently. She didn't rush to answer. Then she said something simple but strong. "I didn't become refined. I just stopped shrinking." The woman blinked, surprised at the honesty. Naya didn't mean it as a show-off line. She meant every word. She didn't change who she was to fit in. She just stopped hiding the person she had always been. She didn't pretend to be rich. She didn't cover her past. She didn't fake confidence. She found her voice, her value, and walked in it without apology. That's what made her different. As the evening ended, Naya stepped out of the building, and Jet was right there, holding the car door open for her. There were a few photographers outside. A few flashes went off as she smiled, stepped into the car, and waved politely. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, but in that moment, everyone watching knew something important. This was the same girl people once said wasn't classy enough. The same girl who wasn't invited, who was laughed at, ignored. Now, she'd become the very example of grace and confidence others looked up to. She didn't post long captions. She didn't throw shade. She didn't need to brag. She had simply become the bar. And the ones who once looked down on her? Now, they were just trying to keep up. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told you're not enough, remember Naya. Tag someone who needs this reminder. Double tap if you believe real class comes from within. Share this with every girl who's been left off the list, until she becomes the list. Because one day, the same room that ignored you will turn when you walk in.